My name is Margarita Hughes, and I'm 32 years old. The restaurant glittered with chandeliers and laughter, but the only sound that cut through the room was my brother James's voice, smooth, confident, and just loud enough for every table around us to hear. Another promotion, another bonus, another reason for my parents to look at him like he hung the moon. He raised his glass of red wine. To another successful merger. Once we finalize the acquisition next week, Continental Bank's digital division will dominate the market. Mom's smile was blinding. That's our James, always reaching higher. Dad nodded, pride radiating off him. It's no surprise you're the youngest VP they've ever had. I stirred my salad, pretending to be fascinated by the dressing, while my thoughts hummed elsewhere. The irony was delicious. James was bragging about a merger he thought he was leading, when in truth he was standing on the edge of losing everything to me. Speaking of work, Mom turned toward me, her voice dipped in politeness that never reached warmth. How's your little company doing, dear Digital? Something. I smiled faintly. Digital payment solutions. It's growing. James snorted into his glass. Growing last. I checked you were working out of a WeWork space. Hardly Wall Street material. That WeWork space, I said softly, has been good to me. He chuckled, shaking his head. Sure. Some people like to play at business. But the real world, I interrupted him before he could finish. Not everyone defines the real world the same way. A flicker crossed Dad's face. Annoyance, perhaps. He leaned forward. James mentioned Continental has a few entry-level openings. You should apply Margarita. It'd give you stability. There it was again. The unspoken message, you're not enough. I'm good where I am, Dad, I replied evenly. James leaned back, smirking. You can't chase startup fantasies forever. At some point, you have to wake up. Wake up! If only he knew how awake I already was, how every acquisition my company made quietly shifted the balance of power beneath his feet. A waiter arrived, refilling our glasses. Anything else I can bring you, sir? He asked James. Just another bottle of this Cabernet, James said, flicking his card onto the tray with a practiced air of wealth. Put it all on me. The waiter returned moments later, his tone careful. I'm sorry, sir. Your card has been declined. The table fell silent. James frowned. That's impossible. Run it again. I did, sir, the waiter said gently. The system indicates a hold due to institutional changes. Institutional changes, James repeated, color rising in his face. I am Continental. I'd know if there were any changes. The waiter's eyes flickered toward me. Recognition dawned, subtle but unmistakable. I offered my card, matte black, no logo, except a faint symbol, etched into its surface, a shadow. Use this, I said quietly. He took it, nodded once, and whispered, Of course, Miss Hughes. My apologies. Congratulations, by the way. James's head snapped up. Congratulations for what? Nothing you need to worry about, I said smoothly, slipping the card back into my clutch as the waiter departed. Mom laughed awkwardly. You shouldn't embarrass your brother like that, dear. He probably just hit a spending limit. Of course, I said, keeping my expression neutral. It happens to the best of us. James muttered something under his breath, gripping his fork tighter. I'll have it sorted by tomorrow. Some system glitch. I took a slow sip of wine. I'm sure you will. He didn't notice the way I lingered on the words, system glitch. Because by tomorrow morning, that glitch would have a name, and that name would be mine. I smiled faintly, glancing at him over the rim of my glass. Don't worry about it, James. Dinner's on me. This time. The city skyline still glowed with the faint gold of dawn when I stepped into my real office. 52 floors above the noise-glass walls, framing Manhattan like a trophy. This was the world my family had never seen, the world I'd built in silence. Morning, Ms. Hughes. Diana. My chief of staff handed me a tablet and a coffee. Press embargo lifts in 20 minutes. CNBC already confirmed your live interview. Good. I scanned the figures glowing across the screen. Every number reflected 3 years of risk, sacrifice, and strategy, all leading to this morning. Continental Bank, James's empire, my newest acquisition. The irony made me smile, but not out of malice. It was satisfaction, the quiet kind that comes from proving everyone wrong without ever raising your voice. My phone buzzed. James. Something strange happening at Continental. Emergency board meeting. Could be about the merger. Will update. Dad. Your brother's making headlines today. Hard work pays off. I almost laughed. It will, I thought. Just not the way you expect. Diana's voice pulled me back. Legal team just confirmed signatures from Continental's board. We officially own 80% of their equity as of 8:30 a.m. Perfect. I looked toward the digital clock, counting down to market open 9:30 sharp. Have communications ready. Once the embargo lifts, I want every outlet covering it simultaneously. She nodded, then hesitated. You sure you don't want to tell your family before the news breaks? I turned toward the window, the city stretching endlessly below. They wouldn't have listened before. Why start now? Diana understood. She'd seen the messages, the years of dismissal, the polite mockery at every family gathering. You know, she said carefully, you could have used a different holding company name, not Shadow Financial. It's a little ominous. That's the point, I replied with a small smirk. The best moves happen in the shadows. She smiled faintly and left to coordinate the media call. Alone, I let my thoughts drift back past the glass walls, past the marble floors, to the small apartment where this all began. I remembered the first time James told me I'd never make it in finance because I was too emotional. I remembered Dad laughing when I said I wanted to run my own company, and Mom's soft sighs, those pitying smiles that said, "Sweetheart, just be realistic." Every condescending comment became fuel, every doubt a blueprint. Now, as the seconds ticked toward the announcement, a calm steadiness filled me. No rage, no revenge, just truth unfolding. 9:29 a.m. Diana reappeared. It's time. Let it go live. The television screens flickered in unison. Breaking news. Shadow Financial acquires Continental Bank in an $8.2 billion deal. The newsroom anchors were already buzzing. Sources confirm this marks the largest acquisition in Shadow's history. Continental executives were reportedly unaware of the buyer's identity. Shadow Financial's CEO, Margarita Hughes, is expected to make a public statement shortly, one of the youngest billionaires in the sector. For a long moment, I just stood there watching my name scroll across every screen in the country. Margarita Hughes, CEO. The same name my family had once spoken with quiet disappointment. The phone lit up again, James's name flashing across the screen, call after call. Not yet, I murmured. Let him wonder a little longer. I adjusted my blazer, straightened my collar, and took one last look at the city below. Today, the world would see what silence had built, and my family would finally understand the power of being underestimated. By 10:15 a.m., my office was vibrating with energy. Every news outlet wanted a statement. My executive team buzzed around like synchronized machinery, efficient, focused, precise. And then the elevator dinged. Diana's voice came through the intercom, uneasy. Ms. Hughes, Continental's VP of Digital Banking is here. Says he's your brother. I didn't need to ask which brother. Let him up, I said evenly, and have security wait outside discreetly. A minute later, the doors burst open. James stormed in, his tie, half-loosened eyes wide and bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept or like the ground had just fallen out from under him. What the hell is going on, Margarita? He demanded. His voice echoed off the glass walls. Shadow Financial Continental's acquisition, I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked calmly to my desk and set down the documents I'd been reviewing. Good morning, James. Congratulations on your company's big day. Don't play games with me. He slammed his palm on the desk. This can't be real. You're telling me you bought Continental Bank. Technically, I said my company did. I just happened to own it. He stared at me as if I'd spoken another language. This is insane. You run a startup, some tiny app thing. It was an app I corrected. Then it became a payment network. Then a lending platform. Then a fintech conglomerate. You know, little by little. James's voice cracked. You mean to tell me the company my division's been negotiating with Shadow was you the whole time? Surprise. He stumbled back, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Do you realize what you've done? You blindsided our entire board. My team, my name, your name. I let out a quiet laugh. You mean the name that's been sitting above mine at every dinner table for 3 decades? He froze. I walked around the desk, standing close enough for him to see the calm in my expression. You once told me that people like me don't belong in real finance, that I'd never last in a man's world of suits and mergers. That was years ago, he snapped, though his voice softened. You can't seriously? I can, and I did. He exhaled shakily, looking at the floor. What happens now? That depends. I picked up a slim folder from the desk and handed it to him. Your current position, VP of Digital Banking, will be restructured, but I'm offering you something new. Director of Innovation, Shadow Financial. You'll have a team, a salary, a clean slate. His head snapped up, a demotion. A real opportunity, I corrected, to learn banking from the ground up. Properly this time. His nostrils flared. You can't demote me. I'm your brother. Exactly, I said quietly. And if I let that influence my decision, I wouldn't deserve to be CEO. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us thickened with years of unspoken resentment, rivalry, and disbelief. James' voice cracked. Do Mom and Dad know? They will, I said. They're on their way here for the press conference. He blinked. You invited them? I didn't have to. They invited themselves once they saw the news. They're probably rehearsing what to say right now. He sank into one of the leather chairs across from my desk, all the fight draining from his shoulders. I don't even know who you are anymore. I gave a faint smile. That's funny. I've been the same person all along. You just never looked closely. The intercom buzzed again. Diana's tone was calm, but I could hear the underlying tension. Ms. Hughes, your parents have arrived. I met James's eyes, then glanced toward the door. Show them in. He stood still, processing the wreckage of his ego. Don't embarrass them, he muttered. Don't worry, I said softly. I'm done embarrassing anyone. Today I'm just telling the truth. The glass doors slid open, and there they were, my parents looking oddly small against the towering skyline behind them. Mom's pearls gleamed in the sunlight. Dad's posture was stiff, his usual confidence tinged with unease. Sweetheart Mom began, her voice soft but strained. We came as soon as we saw the news. Is it true? I gestured toward the chairs opposite my desk. Please sit. And yes, every word of it. Dad's jaw worked soundlessly before he found the words. You're the one who bought Continental, you, of all people. James turned away, still reeling. She's been hiding it for years, he muttered. Mom blinked rapidly, her voice rising. But your startup, your little app, how could it possibly? I smiled faintly, by not being as little as everyone thought. For a long, awkward moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner and the soft tick of the clock. Dad broke the silence. Why didn't you tell us, Margarita, we're your family? My gaze hardened. Because family doesn't always listen. Sometimes they just wait for you to fail. Mom flinched as if I'd struck her. That's not fair. Isn't it? I interrupted gently. Every dinner, every holiday. You talked about James's deals, his promotions, his future. I was the background noise, the hobbyist, the one who needed a real job. Dad straightened, trying to recover his authority. We only wanted what was best for you. You were drifting, playing with ideas. You thought I was incapable, I said quietly. You thought your son was the star and your daughter was a dreamer. James shifted uncomfortably but didn't argue. Mom clasped her hands together, her voice trembling. We were just trying to help, dear. You never gave us a reason to believe it was serious. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. I rose from my chair, walking toward the massive window overlooking the city. Because you only believe in results, not potential. You needed proof. I turned, letting them see the skyline reflected behind me. So I built the proof. No one spoke. Even James stayed silent. Finally, Dad said quieter now. You've done something extraordinary. I'll admit that. But the way you went about it, keeping secrets from your own family, was the only way I could breathe. I cut in. If I'd told you, you would have tried to manage it correct. It molded into something that looked respectable in your eyes. But this I gestured around us. This is mine. Every floor, every screen, every number. Mine. Mom looked at James, her expression torn between pride and guilt. Your sister's quite something, isn't she? James gave a humorless laugh. Yeah, the real world, huh? Guess I've just been living in her shadow all along. That's not what this is about, I said. He turned on me, eyes sharp. Isn't it? You waited years for this moment to humiliate me, to make us all look small. I waited years for you to see me, I said quietly, but you never did. He froze at that. The intercom buzzed. Diana's voice was soft, careful. Ms. Hughes, 5 minutes until the press conference. Media's already assembled. Thank you, I said, not breaking eye contact with my family. Dad rose first. You're really going through with this. I already have, I said. What happens next is just the announcement. He sighed, rubbing his temples. You're your mother's daughter, stubborn to the end. Mom stood her tone cautious but gentler now. We'll come with you. You shouldn't face the press alone. I smiled faintly. I've faced far worse alone. They didn't reply. James lingered near the door, shoulders slumped. As I reached for my jacket, I paused and looked back at them. Front row seats are reserved for you. It's only fair you see the empire you thought would never exist. Then softly, almost to myself, funny how the things you dismiss can end up defining you. The silence that followed was heavy, not hostile, not peaceful, just the fragile stillness that comes before everything changes. The conference hall pulsed with tension. A forest of cameras glinted under the lights, reporters murmured into their microphones, and flashes sparked like miniature lightning. The backdrop bore the sleek silver emblem of Shadow Financial, glowing against matte black walls. I stood behind the curtain, hands steady on the podium notes I wouldn't need. Diana adjusted the mic on my lapel. We're live in 60 seconds. Through a small gap in the curtain, I caught sight of the front row, my parents sitting stiff and silent, Mom clutching her purse like an anchor. Dad expression unreadable. Beside them, James stared at the floor, jaw tight, the press badge around his neck trembling in his fingers. My chest rose and fell slowly. After years of being invisible, every pair of eyes in this room would soon be fixed on me. 30 seconds, Diana whispered. I nodded, exhaling once. Let's do it. The curtain parted. A wall of cameras exploded in light as I stepped onto the stage. The anchor's voice boomed through the speakers. Joining us now is Margarita Hughes, CEO of Shadow Financial, the company behind the largest acquisition in Continental Bank's history. Applause rippled faintly restrained and respectful. I looked out across the sea of faces and began. Good morning. 3 years ago, I started a small fintech project out of a shared office space. I was told it was too ambitious, too risky, too unrealistic. Today, that project, Shadow Financial, stands among the top private financial institutions in North America. More flashes, cameras clicking. I continued, my tone steady, my words sharp as glass. Our vision was simple: to change the way people think about banking. While traditional systems clung to their comfort zones, we built something faster, safer, more, and smarter. And as of this morning, Continental Bank becomes a part of that vision. From the front row, I could see James's face pale slightly. We didn't acquire a company, I said softly, leaning closer to the mic. We acquired the future of finance. There was a pause, half awe, half disbelief. A reporter stood up. Ms. Hughes' sources say Continental's executives were unaware of Shadow's real identity during negotiations. Was that intentional? I smiled faintly. We believe in letting our results speak first. Names and titles often get in the way of clarity. Another question came from the left. Your brother James Hughes is Continental's VP of Digital Banking. How did he react to the news? A soft murmur ran through the room. My gaze flicked briefly toward him. He's processing it, I said simply. But change often begins with discomfort. I trust he'll find his footing. That drew a few quiet chuckles from the crowd. I pressed on, wrapping my hands around the podium as the lights warmed my skin. For too long, innovation has been underestimated, dismissed as fantasy, until it becomes fact. Shadow exists because of that underestimation. We built an empire in silence. Now we speak in results. A beat of silence, then applause steady building. Behind the applause, I heard the faintest tremor of a voice. Mom's. She's really doing it. Dad didn't answer. His eyes glistened, though whether from pride or regret, I couldn't tell. I stepped away from the podium, shaking hands with the moderators, the cameras still flashing. My assistant leaned close. The stock just spiked 20%. CNBC wants a follow-up segment. Bloomberg's calling you the ghost architect of fintech. Schedule both, I said. Tomorrow. As the crowd dispersed, James remained seated, staring at the empty stage. I approached quietly. He looked up at me, eyes red. You made your point. It wasn't about making a point, I said. It was about being seen. He swallowed hard. Well, you're seen now. His voice cracked on the last word. I touched his shoulder lightly. Not as a victor, but as a sister. It doesn't have to end like this, James. There's still a place for you if you want it. He didn't answer, but the defeat in his silence was enough. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A new message. James, I'll take the job, and I'm sorry. I looked back once more at my family framed by the flashing lights of a world they'd never imagined for me. The applause still echoed faintly in the distance, and for the first time, the sound didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure. 3 nights later, I hosted dinner. My dinner in the glass-walled dining room of my penthouse overlooking the city. The same city that had watched me rise quietly, patiently, until no one could look past me anymore. A long oak table stretched between us, candlelight reflecting off polished silverware. The air felt still, too still, like we were all waiting to see who would speak first. James sat across from me, suit perfectly pressed, posture rigid, but the arrogance was gone. In its place was something unfamiliar. Humility. Mom and Dad sat beside him, both unusually quiet eyes, scanning the lavish room as if it might vanish any second. "It's beautiful," Mom finally said, her voice tentative. "The view, the place, all of it." "Thank you," I said softly. "I thought it'd be different from the last time we all had dinner together." James gave a small, self-conscious laugh. "Yeah, I'd say it's an upgrade from last Cirque's." Dad tried to smile, but it faltered. "I still can't wrap my head around it. You really built all this while we thought you were struggling." I poured wine into their glasses. "I was struggling, Dad. Just not the way you think. It wasn't about money. It was about being believed in." Silence again. The kind that didn't hurt this time, just lingered. Mom's hand trembled slightly as she picked up her fork. "We didn't mean to make you feel small, sweetheart. We just thought we were helping. Pushing you to be realistic." I met her eyes. "I know, but sometimes realism is just another word for fear." James set his glass down. "You were right, Margarita, about everything. I was too proud to see it, too busy chasing validation to realize you'd already earned yours." There was no sarcasm in his tone, just honesty, and that coming from James meant more than any apology could. "I appreciate that," I said quietly, "and I'm glad you accepted the job." He nodded, managing a faint smile. "Director of Innovation, right?" A fancy way of saying, "learn humility the hard way." "Something like that," I replied with a smirk. "But I think you'll surprise yourself. You always were good with strategy, just needed to learn the difference between leadership and control." Dad looked down at his plate, then back up at me. "You know, when I saw you on TV, I wasn't sure how to feel. I was proud, yes, but also ashamed. I realized we raised you to chase approval instead of trust." Mom reached for his hand. "We see you now, Margarita. Really see you." The words hit harder than I expected. I'd dreamed of hearing them for years, but standing here in the home I'd built from their doubt, the victory felt quiet, almost bittersweet. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means more than you think." James raised his glass. "To the one who proved us all wrong and somehow did it with more grace than we deserved." I smiled and clinked my glass lightly against his. "To the lesson that took us all too long to learn." The laughter that followed wasn't loud or forced this time. It was soft, genuine, like the first thaw after a long winter. When the meal ended, James lingered by the window, watching the lights below. "You know," he said quietly, "you could have crushed me completely, but you didn't." I walked beside him, looking out over the skyline. "Revenge isn't about destruction, James. It's about balance. I just needed to even the scale." He nodded slowly. "You did more than that. You built something that makes me want to be better." I smiled faintly. "Good, because that's the only kind of victory worth keeping." They left a little before midnight. As the elevator doors closed, the city lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass, the hum of traffic rising like applause far below. I stood alone at the table, the last candle flickering beside my untouched wine. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's proving yourself right and letting them pay for the privilege of watching.